Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. Our panelists are already lined up, so let's convene today's summit. And from Orange County, California, we're joined by Jobob, Turning Point USA contributor. Hello there. From New York City, former Obama administration official Tim Fullerton. Hello. And here in our Tel Aviv studios, international affairs analyst Dan Perry. Hello, Mr. Perry. Thank you all, gentlemen, so very much for joining us today. As our main topic, jumping the gun on gun control after no less than a third mass shooting in California in just 8 days. Is it the usual post-shooting legislation bid or discussion, or are we seeing a true momentum build up here? Let's take a closer look and pick up the conversation from there.
On Friday, 11 people were killed after a mass shooting in Monterey Park, California, as people were celebrating the Lunar New Year. On Sunday, a shooter in the coastal Californian city Half Moon Bay killed 7. If you judge a mass shooting as a firearms attack that injured at least 4, then these are 2 of the 40 attacks that have occurred in 2023 so far. This may feel like Groundhog Day in the US, where mass shootings have become so commonplace that they have to fight for news coverage. President Joe Biden, who made the most significant changes in gun control in June 2022, has called for an outright ban on assault weapons. But with a Republican-controlled House of Representatives who are stringent on the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms, this may be an impossible task. So, will these attacks lead to greater scrutiny on gun safety laws? Or is the fight for gun safety futile? What's more important to the American people, the freedoms of the Constitution or their safety? What's next for American gun laws?
So let's get to it, gentlemen. What's next for American gun laws? As always, we begin with our quick fire round, 30 seconds each to lay out your initial stance on the matter, and we'll pick up the debate from there. Jobob, please take the lead. Your 30 seconds are on.
Yeah, what's new next for American gun laws is honestly probably gridlock. At the national level, it seems a little bit ridiculous. America is a big geographic area, and to say that a law that would work in New York City would also work in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which for people who don't know where Tulsa is a very rural place, seems a little bit futile in terms of getting it pushed through. So I would say gridlock at the national level is the next for American gun laws.
Tim Fullerton, your take?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the federal level, Republicans on a whole have basically said that they don't want to do anything on this issue. And I think what we'll see this year and next year is actually more focused work at the state level. Democrats made some serious gains in states across the country. And part of that's because people are tired of dealing with this epic of gun violence that only happens in this country.
Last but not least, Dan Perry, your take.
I think for the first time ever, I agree with both. Look, every time there's an upsurge in massacres, you see the same agitation with people wanting something, anything to be done, and then it fades away. The real action is at the state level, where blue states like California have taken significant steps, but on a federal level, because a handful of Democrats tend to join the full House of Republicans in opposing anything, you do have gridlock. I will be able to say that America will be seen as getting serious on this when they renew the assault weapons ban.
Okay, and just if we needed any further proof to how controversial the topic really is, we asked I-24 News followers on Twitter today, what do they think? So let's take a look. 51% saying no to tightening gun control in the U.S. 49% saying yes. Again, a perfect reflection of how controversial this topic is. And thank you very much for social media chief Pablo Vinokur for this. And let's feel free to engage from this point onwards, gentlemen. California has the strongest gun laws in the country. Considering the past week, we can't help but wonder, will gun laws stop mass shootings? No other way to put it. Jobob.
to answer your question bluntly, I would say no. And the question that I would pose to everybody who's arguing specifically solely for gun laws is, why are we avoiding so many of the other variables that exist in this country? The point was made earlier that, well, this is the only country that this happens at. And it doesn't seem like a great argument to me. To me, it reminds me that, yes, there are other countries around the world that have high numbers of gun ownership. And instead of looking at the United States as the demon country, why don't we look at the other countries and go, what are they doing culturally to encourage their citizens to be educated on firearms and to not have these sorts of tragedies? And by the way, nobody is pro mass shootings. Nobody on the conservative side of the aisle or the pro-gun side of the aisle wants these things to happen. I'm just looking at it as a broader picture rather than just solely focusing on gun control. Why are we completely avoiding everything else?
I think I can answer the question. I have had to do with the coverage of about 100 countries. None have had the degree of gun ownership that you have in the U.S. Your statement is essentially false. The correlation between gun ownership and the incidence of firearm deaths is spectacularly high. Americans are actually asked to accept something preposterous, which is that there's no connection between how many people have guns and how many people die, when you see that there is a correlation. That correlation is probably causality. And let me just say, America has about 10 gun deaths per 100,000. That is 40 times more than the rate in Britain, which banned guns. You really think the two aren't connected? There is no country in the world that has more guns than people. That's the case in America. And that's probably why America, with 5% of the world's population, has about a third of the massacres. The connection is obvious. And the NRA's claim that guns don't kill people, people kill people, is preposterous when it's very clear that people with guns kill people.
The problem with the claim that you're making is you're assuming then that the amount of guns in other countries isn't enough to kill people, which of course they are, which kind of makes it a moot point. Like if you look at other countries that have higher gun ownership, the amount of guns per person doesn't really matter if that particular gun, like what you're saying, that particular gun can do the same amount of damage. If that's
I'll tell you why it matters.
It really doesn't make it.
It matters because lunatics can't buy weapons. That's why. The guns that are in the hands of people in a place like Israel or Britain or Australia at this point are in the hands of people who have been vetted, who are licensed, and are extremely unlikely to go into a bowling alley and kill 20 people.
Mr. Fullerton.
What makes them unlikely?
Well, what I was going to say is that, our friends to the north, Canada, they have a lot of guns, not as many as the U.S., but they do. But they have licensing and registering, and they have to do that every 5 years in order to keep those guns. So, I mean, if you're talking about wanting to emulate what the rest of the world is doing, you're actually talking about stronger gun laws than we have here. So are we all in agreement that we should have stronger gun laws?
No. Why is there no sort of sense of a cultural shift? If you look at countries like Switzerland that has a huge gun population, they have shooting contests at the young age. Every male from the age of 18 to 34 is required to be able to use a handgun. Why are there no options being talked about that make education a priority?
In Switzerland, it is extremely regulated. It's completely regulated, totally licensed. There's a lot of people that have guns, but there are no nuts that have guns. The idea that America the idea that America is a country where there are other factors involved, like a mental imbalance, is really ridiculous, Jobob. I've actually looked into rates of depression and other mental illness in America versus other countries. There is no difference in, for example, the rate of depression between America and Australia. The difference is the gun laws.
Jobob, please.
So the point you're making is talking about gun deaths specifically, too. There's also several studies that have come out of Australia that show the violent crime and homicides really haven't fluctuated much since their bans. The tools that they're using are different, but to say that it's specifically a gun thing. Here's the thing. The only thing I'm asking you, too, right now, and I'm not asking you to agree with me, I'm just wondering why it is that guns and gun laws is the only thing we look at. I am pro stopping mass shootings, but in the 70s, you had kids walking around in high high schools with gun racks on their cars and nothing happened. To say that there is no cultural shift to be looked at is ridiculous.
The focus on gun laws.
Okay, let's do that then. So let's say, first of all, there hasn't been a mass shooting or mass casualty event in Australia since they banned assault weapons and they confiscated a lot of. They had people.
But what about the violent crime and the homicide rates?
Second of all, if you're talking about a cultural shift, then you and the conservatives on the right should be supporting greater access to health care. How many votes did we get for the Obamacare bill? Almost none from Republicans. Those bills have mental health funding in them, and you're laughing at it, but it's true. Everyone talks, oh, these people are ill, but then you don't want to put any money towards actually helping people before we get to that situation.
No, I don't want to put government money.
The government, it's not video games and garbage like that. Like,
are you arguing that the government is good at doing things? Because that's the sole stance on the healthcare. This is not a healthcare argument. But if you're arguing that the government is better than the free market and the private sector at providing things, then it's a different conversation.
I would say that the government would be better than the private sector in banning weapons.
Yeah, gentlemen, we want to hear all of you. It's difficult to hear all of you at once. No, you're great. You're terrific. We enjoy listening to you. Dan Perry, steer the wheels.
I would say that the reason that go ahead, Tim, and I'll speak after.
Well, what I was going to say was that, the government did supply 20 million Americans that didn't have health care before, which includes health screening stuff and mental health capacity. So there is that. Second of all, states that have stronger gun laws have lower gun deaths. It is a fact. There was a whole issue in Oklahoma where they laughed because the Democratic nominee for governor said that Oklahoma had a higher gun death per capita than New York. Everyone laughed at them for that because of all the demonization of New York City. The fact is, it's true. So what is the conservative solutions to having 36,000 Americans die with gun violence every year? What is your cultural solution that is going to make that number drop by any dramatic amount?
There's a lot of things that I got to address there. First things first, 20 million people have worse health care, and it's more expensive for everybody, but we'll leave that there for the side. And when you're talking about more gun deaths in red states versus blue states, you're only accounting for the tool. If you're talking about violent crime as a whole, the statistics are a moot point. Like, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. And if you just look at the sole gun and the tool for violence, you're going to get some wonky statistics. But we're trying to stop violence and
how about logic? I've yet to encounter a knife that can kill 20 people before the wielder is disarmed. And the reason why people focus on gun laws in America versus the so-called other factors is because America's ridiculously lax gun laws are the only factor where America's an outlier. America is not an outlier in any other thing relevant to this issue. That is why that is the focus.
Let me give you an example on mass shootings. So when we had an assault weapons ban for 10 years, from the mid-90s to 200005, do you know how many see, you play this game because you don't want people who don't have a strict knowledge about guns to be able to talk about it. But the reality is something with high capacity magazine, that one mass shooting, I do know. There was one mass shooting with 10 or more deaths in the time that we had an assault weapons ban in 10 years. Do you know how many we've had in the preceding 18 years since it's lapsed? 21. 21 deaths, 21 mass shootings with 10 or more people. What was the one thing that changed?
There's another data point that is really very clear. When the assault weapon ban was allowed to expire in 2004, pretty much immediately, gun deaths went up by 20%. Now, there was no other factor. There was no cultural shift. There was no big mystery. The correlation was clearly causal.
Jobob, 18 seconds before we wrap up this part of the debate.
If you ban cars, auto deaths are going to go down, but guess what? Public transit deaths are going to go up. You're talking about a tool. You're not talking about a cultural shift towards anti-violence. That's what I'm trying to get at here. You're talking about specifically a tool.
Okay, gentlemen. On that note, hold your thoughts right there. We obviously have so much more to unpack, and you're staying with us. We're taking a very short break now, but when we get back, part 2 of our conversation, maybe we'll get to a resolution. Can't promise you that, but it will be interesting for sure. Do not go anywhere. We're back in a bit.